Okay, I've got my black circles cut out and I've saved my templates so that I can iron them on the wool again. And now I've taken the paper off the back of the wool, so they're ready to be ironed down. You want to just line up the raw edges, get this across. Oops. Sometimes it helps to, when you're working with wool, if you turn it over so that the heat gets to the fusible from the back side. Sometimes it takes longer to, and then you're scorching your iron with the wool. Again, you're going to make sure that your raw edges are lined up. Okay, last one. Okay, so I'm going to separate this out into sections. There's section C. This is section B. Section A. Okay, just as we counted backwards when we cut the pattern apart, now we're going to go ahead and put them together 1 to 2, and then we'll add 3. 1 to 2 and add 3. And so to do this, if you notice that we have the dots on the pattern over here, and so when you go to pick up your pieces, here is A1 and A2, and you're going to look along, you're going to flip this right sides together, your raw edge is even, and then you're going to look along your seam line and see which end the dot is at, and it's at this end. So that means you are going to try and pay attention and get your seam straight across here. And so to do that, the way I explain this is it's always hard to know how much of a tail to leave hanging over. And my rule is that where those two fabrics meet, right there, that is where your needle is supposed to go in. So if your needle goes in right there, your seam is way too fat. And likewise, if you don't leave enough of a tail, and then where they meet is right there, and that's way too skinny of a seam. So you're going for that Goldilocks rule. You want it to be just right. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just asking you to try to keep it straight, and that minimizes how much fabric you're trimming off when you put your sections together. So if we pin that there and iron this out, then that looks straight. And that's what we're aiming for, is you're going to try to keep it straight. So I'm going to go ahead now and go to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew all my 1s to 2s. Likewise, here's section B. Here's B1 and B2. I'm going to flip them right sides together. I'm going to look along the seam line. No dot there. The dot is here. And that's a pretty easy match because there's no little dog ears sticking out. So that will just turn it around here. Here to C1 and C2, we're going to flip it right sides together, and again you're going to look along your seam line. Here's your dot, so that means you have to leave that little dog ear sticking over right there. Now this is the important end, so I am going to turn this upside down to sew, and I can see that my wool is not, it's hanging over on the raw edge, so I am going to clip that wool back. Okay, so let's put it back here, make sure I've got everything where it's supposed to be. Flip it right sides together. Here's your dot, and then I'm going to turn it upside down. Make sure I have the little dog ear. Come back over here and sew. Okay, we're going to come over to the iron. I always press the way they want to go, and you don't want to fight this wool and try to, because that'll make the seam really fat. So I'm going to press it to that start point. Putting back down on my master. This is section A, section C, and here's section B. So again, now we've got all our 1s to 2s, and see how it's nice and straight up here, and then this is where the dog ear comes. And here, it's nice and straight on the inside where that dot was, and then we've got the extra hanging off over here. That's the way it's supposed to be. So now we're going to go ahead and add our 3s. Flip them right sides together. You're going to look along the seam line, and there's your dot. So even on these shallow seams, or these shallow dog ears, that is still a dog ear. So here, I don't know if you can see that, but where this gold comes and meets this cream on top is right there. So that is way too fat of a seam. So we're going to scoot that way until where they meet. Even though that's a tiny little dog ear, that's where you want it. It's right there. Okay, so we're going to come over here, add all our 3s. Okay, here's section B. Flip it right sides together. Look along your seam line. And now this is a good example. Here's your dot. So this is where we need to pay attention to our 1/4 inch seam. Down here, when you're sewing your 1s to 2s to 3s, this dog ear down here can be ignored. You're going to sew 1/4 inch away from the plaid on top. But if you've got, if this bothers you, you can go ahead. Before you sew that on, you just scoot it over here. Line your ruler up with the gold. The gold star leg, you're not going to take any of that off, and you're just going to cut this little tail off right there. Okay, so then we come back here, right sides together, raw edge is even, and you want just a little bit of a dog ear, so there's your point. Okay, now this is a really long, on section C, this is too long. So this has to be trimmed. You can't tell where you're sewing. If you flip these right sides together and line up with that gold, that is way too much to eyeball. So that I definitely will trim. And you're lining up again with this gold start point. And this edge should be roughly parallel to your ruler. So you haven't changed the angle of the pattern at all when you're cutting. You've lined up, you're not taking any of the gold off, and what you are taking off is parallel to your ruler, so you know that's a good thing. Okay, so that's going to come off. Back up here, right sides together. Okay, now we're going to look along this line. There's no dot at either end, but the dot is in the middle. So that says that you are to line up your circle. Okay, and on a circle it's like a diagonal seam. You're going to fold it where you think it's supposed to go. And then I fold this back a scant quarter, and first I'm going to make it wrong. And I fold it back a scant quarter, and I've got this edge and that edge, so I've missed. I'm going to just slide it down till it lines up. Okay, and that I am going to pin. Okay, and then over to my machine. Again, I'm going to press away from the wool, just so the seam's not so bulky. This back in place, that's section A. Again, this is, I'm going to press away from the wool, so into this star seam. Section B. Now this one, you've got wool on both sides, but the least amount over here, so I'm going to go ahead and press that direction. Let's see, I did do a pretty good job with my circle match. Okay, so now there's your 3 sections, and again, we're uneven here. That's because we matched up here, and we're uneven here, but that's all good. So now we've got sections A, B, C, and in order to, before we can put them together alphabetically, A to B first, you're going to lay your ruler on here and take the very least amount off. That means you're going to line up primarily with the gold. I'm going to have to stand up so I can cut. And this is pretty typical. You've got a little tail down here and maybe a little bit in the middle. And again, you'll notice that this is parallel to your ruler, so things are good. Okay, so that's nice and straight. Okay, and even though you know, I was trying to keep the inside seam straight here, I'm off a little bit there. That's all right. We were trying to keep it straight. I'm not going to rip that out, but I am going to take the very least amount off. So I'm going to line up here, and then everything else is roughly parallel to my ruler. Off it comes. Okay, now I know you're tempted to go all the way around to straighten, but I'm going to ask that you only straighten the seam you're sewing. And this time we're going to flip them right sides together, and we're going to match this seam on the star. And again, you want to fold it back and make sure you've got a match there. And I do pin when there's a place to match. I do put a pin in. Okay. Back to the sewing machine.